One of the most interesting storylines for the upcoming NCAA season is who is Penn State going to put on the mat this year? Who are going to be their starters? Who's going to redshirt? Who changes weights? Who stays down? Whatever. There's a lot of different questions. There's going to be some new faces. There's going to be some transfers. There's going to be some good guys redshirting or on the bench next year. So I'm going to give you my prediction of who I think is going to be the starting lineup for Penn State next year. And the stakes are high. First of all, this team on paper looks like they're going to run away with the national title. We're going to go wire to wire, ranked number one. There's little question about that. The actual question is, can this team push for the 1997 record, the NCAA scoring record of 170 points held by the Iowa Hawkeyes in 1997? That's the question, right? So we're going to look at this lineup. I'll give you my thoughts. We'll get into more detail as we get closer to the season on if this team can potentially threaten that incredible scoring record set by the Hawkeyes and Dan Gable's last year. So looking at this team, we're going to start at 125 pounds, where we're going to see, in my opinion, Robbie Howard back on the mat. Fingers crossed that Robbie's going to be back and healthy. And an interesting thing about Robbie is he actually has 4 years of eligibility remaining. And I know you're probably thinking, no, that can't be right, CP. We saw this guy. He wrestled in their 2021 NCAA tournament. Yes, he did. But that year didn't count. And then the year after that, he redshirted. And the year after that, he's going to get a medical redshirt. So he hasn't exhausted any years of eligibility. Now, it remains to be seen if Robbie's going to want to stay in school 4 more years. But bottom line is Robbie could wrestle 4 more years, and he could wrestle next year. And he looks like he'll probably be the best guy if he's healthy. To recall, he probably would have redshirted his true freshman year had there been the normal eligibility rules. But even in that year, he was an NCAA qualifier. He beat Dylan Ragusin. He beat Malik Heinzelman. He had some other good wins. So he showed some promise as a true freshman. And now injuries have certainly derailed his progress. But this was a number 1 ranked guy coming out of high school and someone who Penn State was expecting some pretty significant production from. And now next year is his chance to make his mark. And the stars are kind of aligning for Robbie because 125, candidly, has never been weaker, right? In recent memory, you lose Spencer Lee, you lose Patrick Glory, year before that you lose Soriano. So the playing field has been leveled significantly, and I think we could see Robbie Howard push for All-American honors, maybe even higher, depending on how healthy he is and how much he's been able to develop. We haven't seen a lot of Robbie Howard, so it's definitely a projection more than anything. We have evidence to say, hey, yeah, he's going to do this or that. But I think All-American honors are certainly on the table for Robbie Howard, and they're going to need contribution at 125 if they want to push for the scoring record. At 133 pounds, they're going to have Aaron Nagao, and they have Nagao. I mean, he was for Big Ten's NCAAs, he was one of the top storylines. This guy just broke out and looked like an absolute hammer for Minnesota. He makes the move from Minnesota to Penn State, 3 years remaining of eligibility, and now down the line with these lightweights, they're going to have an infusion of talent. And I don't see Nagao going anywhere in terms of the starting lineup. Now, he could change weights eventually, but I see him as the 33 kind of for the next couple of years. They're going to have Braden Davis come in this year. He can redshirt. And the year after that, they're going to have Mason Gibson and Luke Lillidahl between 125 and 133. So there's going to be some figuring out to do. There's going to be some, there's a puzzle to put together. And putting the pieces in the right places is going to be one of the big challenges for Coach Sanderson. But he's got nothing but good problems. He's got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of guys that can contribute. And it looks like Nagao's going to be the guy for the next 3 years. And he's someone, when you look at his arc of improvement that he's seen at Minnesota, if that just continues at Penn State, he's someone who could challenge for a national title next year. Now, Vito's back. That's going to make it tough. I don't know if anyone can knock him off. But finals is a possibility. Now, then again, there's Dayton Fix. But still, you can expect some pretty significant points at 133 for Penn State and Aaron Nagao. You move up to 141, it's pretty clear. It's going to be Bo Bartlett's weight. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. He looked awesome at the end of last year, placing 3rd. Looks like someone who could push for the finals. If Andrew Aliris takes an Olympic red shirt, Bo Bartlett could be right there to push for a finals, maybe even a national title at 141 pounds next year for Penn State. And then at 149, another guy. And this guy was maybe one of the biggest stories at NCAAs. He had not really notched a top 20 win pretty much all year. And then Shane Van Ness goes crazy, placing 3rd at 149 pounds, giving Yanni one of his toughest matches all year. So you take his NCAA success and you say, okay, if he can just get a little bit better coming into next year, he could push to make the finals. He could maybe even push for a a national title next year at 149 pounds. Now, for Penn State, Shane Van Ness has 3 years of eligibility remaining, and they got Tyler Kasak coming in. Tyler Kasak is an absolute hammer. If you watched him at the U.S. Open at Junior Nationals, he looked phenomenal. He looks like a guy who could contend for All-American honors next year. But fortunately for Penn State, he can redshirt or Olympic redshirt. So they can kick down the Kasak thing a couple more years. But eventually, Kasak's going to need to find his way in the lineup somehow, right? But for the next 3 years, I feel like Van Ness is not a guy that's going to change weights. I think he's going to be 149 across the board. I think he's perfectly sized for that weight class, so I don't see him changing. Maybe Kasak grows into 157, where I think for this year, we'll see Levi Haynes there again. Now, last year, the talk about Levi was like, man, he's really big. Can he make it again? He's going to go up next year. What's that do with Facundo, et cetera, et cetera? Well, by the time NCAAs concluded, it was basically like, no, Levi can probably go 157 again. So I think we will see Levi at 157. I think he's going to contend for a national title. I think he's the favorite to win it. I mean, he was second last year. The guy that won, Austin O'Connor, who's a monster, he's graduated. He's gone. So he's not a consideration anymore for this conversation. I think Levi, when you consider his trajectory, his arc of improvement, he's very likely going to win a title at 157 next year for Penn State. Now, what they do down the line with Kasak, with even an Eric Gibson at 157, that's going to take some juggling, because Levi could still redshirt. You assume Eric Gibson's going to redshirt this year. You got Kasak. But I think for this year, they don't have to worry about it. They can just wrestle Levi, and they don't have anyone good on the bench. They can just redshirt some of those hammers. Now, 165 is particularly interesting because you've got Alex Facundo, who, while he went 0-2 this year at NCAAs, he did have glimpses. He did have moments. He did beat some good guys. He beat Cam Amin this year. He beat Carson Hartschla, right? So he's got some good wins under his belt. The question is, can he, do it at Big Tens? Can he do it at NCAAs? And they also have high impact transfer Mitchell Messenbrink, who we've seen take the freestyle stage by storm. He looked great at juniors, kind of dominated through. He beat Levi Haynes last year in freestyle, but we haven't seen really what he can do in folk style at the national level in kind of a while. So a lot of people are really excited to see what he can do. My opinion is we see Alex Facundo take an Olympic red shirt, but I gotta also add, that's also an option for Mitchell Messenbrink. Either of these guys could take Olympic red shirts because they are previous age level world medalists. So they don't have to necessarily bench one of them. One of them can take an Olympic, the other one can start. I think Mitchell Messenbrink looks to be the guy that has the highest point scoring capability for next year. And for that reason, I think he will be their 65 next year. And I think Facundo can take an Olympic red shirt. Okay, and I think that's sort of a seamless fit for Penn State. It doesn't necessarily, everyone was like, well, man, they bring in Mitchell. What's that mean for Facundo? Well, nothing at this point. He could Olympic redshirt, and then they can kick that sort of the roster battle down the line a bit. But I think if Penn State's going to push for that team record, which they may not admit it, but you've got to assume that that's something that Coach Sanderson and that staff have their eye on. They've got this incredible streak, they've got this incredible dominance, but that 170 mark set by the Iowa Hawkeyes in 1997 has to be something that Cale would like to get. And this team, on paper, looks like the one poised best to knock that record out. Now, it's still going to be really tough, and we'll get into that in another video, but for right now, just kind of laying out who's going to be the guys for Penn State next year. Now, looking up to 174, they've got Carter Starace. Now, Starace, there's some speculation about will he be back this year. That speculation was basically started by Carter Starace, who at NCAAs was like, yeah, maybe I'll be back, maybe I won't, I don't know. It depends. But for me, there's no hesitation in this prediction. I think Carter Starace is going to wrestle next year for Penn State. There's no doubt about it. He's a 3-time champion. He can enter that rarefied air of becoming a 4-time NCAA champion. I don't think you turn your back on that. I think he's going to be back. He'll be their guy at 174. And that allows them to redshirt Josh Barr, a stud from Michigan, who could potentially fill in the next year. Now, another good problem for Penn State is that Carter could not just come back next year, but the year after that and become a 5-time NCAA champion. But he has told me, he's told others, hey, I'm not really that interested in becoming a 5-time NCAA champion, but minds can change, right? And they could say, hey, yeah, come back. So I think for this year, I feel almost certain he'll be back. And 5th year, I'm not saying I would not rule it out for Carter to return, in which case the bar thing could get a little more interesting. But those are 2024, 25 problems to solve. Nothing that should really press Coach Sanderson and staff for this coming year. 184, they were going to have a hole, right? Well, insert Bernie Truax from Cal Poly. He's been fourth the last 3 years. He slots in perfectly at 184 pounds because Aaron Brooks is moving up. We'll get to Aaron in a second, but when you look at the construction of 184, there's no doubt that Bernie Truax can win the national title because, in my opinion, I think Trent Hidley is going to move up to 197 to make room for Dylan Fishback at NC State. And I think it's almost certain that Aaron Brooks is going to go up to 197. So really, it looks to be like two big dogs remaining at 184. Parker Keckheisen, the returning NCAA finalist, and Bernie Truax, now of Penn State. I think Bernie has the ability to be an NCAA champion. He has beaten Parker Keckheisen, but Parker's beaten him, and Parker had a better year last year. So right now, Parker would be the favorite, but you can't rule out Bernie as a potential NCAA champion next year for Penn State. And another guy you can't rule out, and actually one of the bigger favorites going into next year, will be Penn State's 197-pounder Aaron Brooks, who has been telling everyone who listen, hey, I'm going up next year. I'm done with 184. The cut was really tough for me. I did it for the team, but now I'm moving up to 197. And reportedly, he was telling guys on the podium, hey, I'm going up next year. I'm not going to be at 84 anymore. So expect to see Aaron Brooks at 197 pounds, where I think he'll be a considerable favorite there, as he would have been at 184. And that'll be his last year of eligibility, just like Bernie Truax's. And then Greg Hertfleet has 2 years remaining. He'll be their heavyweight, and he's going to be number one ranked coming into the year. Mason Paris is gone. Wyatt Hendrickson is someone who will probably be ranked second that Hertfleet's already beaten. He'll have some other familiar foes like Tony Cassiope and Lucas Davison. But on paper right now, Greg Hertfleet will be the favorite to win an NCAA championship at 285 pounds, just completing an absolutely loaded lineup for Penn State and company. Now, one thing with this heavyweight dynamic is the boogeyman sort of looms here, and that Gable Steveson does have a year of eligibility. He could wrestle at heavyweight if he so chose. I don't know that he will. I know it was a consideration last year, and I know it's something that he could do this year. But until he comes out, Hertfleet's going to be the man here. He's going to be a favorite. And the Penn State lineup, top to bottom, I don't think there's a weight where they can't place, and I think there's a lot of weights they can be wrestling on Saturday night. And for Penn State fans, for Coach Sanderson, next year is going to be a really fun year.